Hey, scrappy people. Traci Reed here today, coming at you with a TRD Sketchy Sunday layout. This is the sketch that we're going to be using today. It is sketch number 34, and I have pre-planned a little bit of this in Photoshop just because it's easier for me to get like the right cutouts in Photoshop since I don't have all of the different size circle punches and that sort of a thing. Plus, I also wanted to use this gorgeous mixed media border that's included in the Renewal digital kit, which is the collection that I'm using today. And so I wanted to add this to the paper before I printed it. So I went ahead and did that in Photoshop. Today I'm going to be scrapbooking about my middle son's 17th birthday that we celebrated together, in which he wanted to go thrifting and he wanted to go record hunting, and he's just such a cool kid that I wanted to scrapbook his birthday. And of course, he very much breaks the mold. He's always loved purple as his favorite color, so the Renewal collection works really well for that. I've also pulled out some matching Catherine Pooler inks for this collection to see maybe if I want to add more mixed media or more stuff to this page. I don't think I'm going to add too much because there will be these big blocks of pattern that take up most of the page, so I don't really need to add too much to the background here, but I might ink some edges, do some stamping if I feel like it. So let's get started. Okie dokie. So interestingly, I had to change my plan a little bit from what I was initially going to do because when I was working on this in Photoshop, I definitely took into account the holes and the division in the page, but I don't think I really thought about it. So I ended up having to change this just slightly. I decided to start with some texture and use my distressing tool to roughen up the edges of this paper. I printed this at home on Epson Premium Presentation paper, which is a little bit thinner than normal cardstock. So it's definitely hard to get a grip on the edges of this to roughen it up. It was like wanting to bend rather than fold and tear. So I struggled a little bit, but we got there. I'm going to do the same thing to this blue one that's going in the middle. So I chose to do two of the columns, that beautiful plaid, and the middle column, this navy blue, because I wanted the two outside ones to match, because the two outside ones are going to have both pictures of Joe, and then the middle one is going to be a picture of he and I together. So I just wanted a little bit of consistency in what I chose as far as backgrounds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put all these columns down, make sure that they are evenly spaced, and that center column is nice and centered on the middle line. That way when I cut the page in half, it's not going to be like lopsided. And I want to make sure that there is a good 1/4 inch between the top and bottom and outside edges on both of these pages. That's kind of what I'm eyeballing here. Luckily, pro tip, practice doing this for, I don't know, 20 years, and then you can just eyeball it too. If not, you can just use a T-square and measure 1/4 inch in on all sides, but it doesn't have to be perfect for me, and I normally get it pretty close. So I was good just eyeballing it. So then I'm going to ink the edges of each of these circles for the photo mats. I wanted to add in a little bit of texture and depth in different ways on this hybrid page, because obviously hybrid pages are all paper based because you're printing, so you can lose some of the texture, lose some of the depth if you just use straight papers the whole way. So one way to or two ways to start combating the flatness of a hybrid page is to ink the edges, distress the edges, tear, pop things up on pop dots. There's lots and lots of different ways I do that in this page specifically. I don't do any tearing or folding on this page, although I have been doing that a lot recently. But I do ink and distress and use some pop dots to get some depth. I didn't want too much thickness on this page because I do want to, as much as possible, limit the number of albums that I'm using. I have an album for each of my children, and then I have a album, like I do an album for our vacations, and then I have an album that is for me. I find that typically covers the subject matter that I need to cover. Typically, my husband is either in photos with me or photos with our kids, so he goes into whichever album he's of the person he's with. So can't scrapbook everyone for everything. So he gets stuck with the rest of us. So initially, this is where I start changing things. Initially, I have this journal card in the center column, and I decided that I just couldn't live with cutting it in half, and the phrase was just too long for me to cut it in half. It would have made it too hard for it to be legible. So I decided to put it on this column instead and do what I was going to do on this column on the other page. And obviously I tore the paper when I pulled up my photo. That's okay. I'm going to put stuff on top of it, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. I will cover all that up, but I'm just trying to place this photo in between the holes, which it does deviate from the sketch a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, but it creates a little bit of an interesting off balance sort of vibe that I kind of struggle with correcting the rest of the time I'm working on this page. It's not like crazy off balance, like it still flows with the page, and it's just slightly lower than it is on the sketch. Or is it high on the sketch? I don't know. It went in a little bit different of a direction, but I do struggle just a little bit to balance out the way that it ends up looking. I love this page. It came out great, but I will let you know that it was a little bit of a struggle. We'll get there. So I'm going to use some of this ink and some Citrus Twist letter stamps to add to my title here, and then these big numbers from the sticker sheet. This is obviously for his birthday, so he's turning 17, so we're going to use 17. And then I have these 3 half circles that are going to go in each of those half circle slots. I did pre-plan so that they would fit perfectly. The sketch itself has a slightly larger cutout on each of these little half circles, but I just created the page so that they would fit in there perfectly. Beauty of hybrid scrapbooking again. So I'm going to use this tag as a way to cover up all of that mess back there. But I had actually initially planned that already, so that's why I knew that it wasn't a big deal that the photo had ripped the paper, because I knew that I was going to use this tag. Now I did struggle a little bit with the placement of this tag and the 17, just because it was hard to make sure I was covering up all of that tear and get it nice and like evenly spaced so that it looked good. So I'm going to first stamp "this is," so that the whole thing says "this is 17," and I made sure to justify it so that I could stick that corner of the label underneath the 1 when I get it there. This is where I start to struggle, and I do cut most of the struggle out just because it really did take me a very long time to get this right. Obviously I went straight for wrong. That's not supposed to go there. The 1 is supposed to go there. So there's my starting point, and you can see why it was such a struggle. So I'm going to start putting this down, and this has to go. I wanted it framed so that the 7 was right underneath "this is," and this is why it was such a problem. It's because this was initially supposed to go where that big journal card is, it's actually a Traveler's Notebook signature that I cut into journal card size. This was initially supposed to go there, which would have left more than enough room for the 17 to stagger that way, which is the way I originally thought I was going to do it. But because I'm putting it above this photo, and this photo has to go in between, like right in the center of the page, so that I don't punch holes in either of our faces, I had a lot less room to work with when I was putting this down. Now I end up getting it to a place where I like it. You can see that was my jazz hands for making me happy. And I'm going to cover up the rest of that tear with this yellow star. No whining, no whining. I was going to cover up the rest of this tear with this yellow star, and I'm going to use all the stars on this page, all the pattern stars from the stickers. But I'm going to put a couple down, like the bigger ones are going to go straight on to the page. And then I'm going to pop the smaller ones up on foam tape or pop dots or whatever you want to use to give it a little bit more depth. I need to, sorry about my hair, I need to realign the edges of these stars with some liquid glue because they popped off when I cut the paper in half. So I'm just sticking them down with liquid glue, right where they go directly across from the page. I always make sure I realign the page every time I move things around so that when I put the star down, it lines up right. There will be a space in between the pages, obviously, but I like it to line up anyway. So I'm going to do the same thing with this blue over here, pop it down right directly on the page, and then I'm going to start using foam tape on these smaller stars to give the page just a little bit more depth so that, again, because we're working with hybrid pages, everything is paper, so this is a good way to create some shadows, create some texture without adding too much to the page or too much thick stuff to the page. I am going to end up adding some acrylic to this page, so I probably could have not worried about thickness so much, but I didn't know I was going to do that before I did it, so it's just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I always have a hard time with these scrapbook.com the foam pieces. I always have a hard time peeling the backing off. It always wants to just separate the adhesive itself, which drives me insane. So I want to branch out and spread some of these stars out to the farther side of the page too, because everything's getting a little bit clustered in the center. Okay, I like that, but I feel like there's just something missing, which is when I start bringing in the acrylic. So these are color cast designs, acrylic, like they're asterisk stars. I thought that that was a good way to bring in another star shape without it being just super repetitive. And I loved this clear sparkly one. I only had the one. If I had 3 of these, I would have been a happy camper. I'm peeling the backing off so that it is completely see-through, and then I'm going to put that one and a couple of the frosted ones down on the page in these clusters. Just add that little bit of different texture, a little bit of different shape that adds some more visual interest. And then the last thing I decided to do is I'm going to ink the edges of this page directly too. I think it frames the page and grounds the whole thing in a way that needed to be done. I'm only doing the outside edges. I decided not to do the inside edge because the design spans the inside edge, and also just by doing just the outside, it makes the whole page framed. And that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. I would love to have you. If you don't already, you can follow me over on Instagram. I'm at Traci. I'd love to see you over there as well. And I will see you next time. All right. Thank you.